Week 6 is here. The season's flying by. We had a couple more injuries to add to the total in week 5, so it's time to show you where we can find some value in the rest of the NFL. Some first read rate charts have changed, some injuries have changed those, and also some breakout games. But let's just break into it and see where you can find an edge in week 6.
Let's do it. Thank you for the beautiful intro, Grant.
Starting off with the Giants playing tonight against Philly. I don't even know where to begin without Malik Neighbors there. We saw a bunch of different people get targets. Didn't really go to Wandale like some people expected. His segment on this chart has stayed pretty much the exact same as we've gone on in the season. Theo Johnson had a decent game, but target share wasn't crazy. I think this ended up resulting in a lot of dump-offs to Cam Scatterby, which should be the case tonight against the Eagles.
Especially considering Scatterby's red zone read rate is so high. I feel like he's going to get hit a ton.
Yeah. I think that's probably where most of the targets are going, just dump-offs.
Was it Wandale or Darius Slayton who finished out last season as like top 20 in targets?
Probably Wandale.
Yeah. So that is surprising that it went a little bit more towards Slayton. I mean, not a huge sample size, but
yeah. No, I agree. I just don't love any of these pass catchers. We can discuss running backs at a later time, but I think that the pass catchers here are all pretty gross. I don't feel great starting any of them.
Theo, I feel like maybe Theo, if you're like sketch at tight end, you could maybe start.
Yeah, or if it's tight end premium or something like that. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's where we will start for now.
And so you want to tier the running backs like at the end?
Yeah, we can just do that at the end. We'll discuss all the guys in the matchups and then just put them in respectively later. But looking at the Eagles, Devontae Smith had a huge game last week. Giants secondary has been decent, but they've been prone to some big plays. We saw Rashid Shaheed get behind the secondary a ton last week, and A.J. Brown is probably their closest profile to that. I know he's a lot more skilled and versatile, but he is probably the guy that could get behind the defense on some go routes. So maybe you see a little A.J. Brown breakout performance tonight against the Giants. Devontae Smith, you probably feel decent about going your lineup just because the target share was really good last week, and he's kind of the main guy for those intermediate routes. And then the tight ends in general, I'm probably staying off of.
Yeah, it's been kind of a difficult time for the Eagles pass catchers. I do agree with you that it's like as fun of a week to get in on a potential A.J. Brown bounce back as any just against this more shaky Giants secondary. His usage has been pretty terrible all season. Obviously, the first read last week wasn't where you want to see it. It's a lot closer to 50% so far this season. But I think this is a great week. He's not going to have like a Patrick Surtain or anything in coverage against him. So as good of a week as any. And probably a reasonable number for A.J. Brown this week too.
Agreed. Broncos, interesting week last week. They looked good against the Eagles. Courtland Sutton is just a super high floor guy. He's always going to get you a decent amount of points, and you're always going to feel good throwing him into your lineups. This week, they're playing super early in the morning, playing in London, third week in a row of us having one of those games on the slate. Jets defense has been terrible. I feel good starting Courtland Sutton for sure. Everyone else, like the targets can kind of just come and go every week. It's hard to like fully lock in on which one of these guys will be the second option. But if you're in a really deep league, I feel fine about throwing like Troy Franklin in there.
Yeah, totally. I'd pretty much just second what you said. Obviously, we'll get into RBs later, but good spot for Dobbins, and then Sutton definitely a start. Don't think I'm starting any of the other Broncos wide receivers this week. Like the Jets defense isn't amazing, but they're overseas, which always, I feel like I don't know the stats on this, but I feel like it kind of
sloppy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Arizona, Marv has obviously gotten off to a decent start. The last 2 weeks especially, almost caught that touchdown, should have caught a touchdown last week. was just ruled down like a couple inches short. They play the Colts this week. Should be playing from behind throughout, throwing the ball a ton. McBride and Marv are both guys you feel pretty good starting. No other pass catchers I'm starting at all. And you feel pretty good if you have Michael Carter because he was pretty involved in the passing game. Amari DiMercato might be shipped to the shadow realm after his performance last week. So you might get an even bigger uptick in Michael Carter work. But outside of that, nobody else relevant to me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much more I can add here. Their first read chart is so funny. It's just Marvin McBride every week. It's like, how much more straightforward could it get? But yeah, let's move on. I'll be starting Michael Carter in my flex most likely in one of my home leagues this week.
As will I. Falcons had a bye in week 5, so we didn't get any extra info on them, but they take on the Bills on Monday night. Should again be playing from behind. Drake London looked really good in that spot last week, or I guess 2 weeks ago in week 4. Had his biggest game of the year. I expect him to continue to build on that. Might not equal that performance, but I think he should be a solidified like wide receiver 1 type player that you're feeling good about throwing into your lineup after he had that breakout. Pitts is still at a good share of red zone targets, and I like Darnell Mooney. If you're in a deeper league, maybe you just stash him this week. You don't feel good about starting him, but I think it's a good enough matchup that if you're in a bind and he's the guy on your roster, I think he could do a job at flex this week.
Yeah, I would imagine. I mean, I love what I saw from Drake London last week, finally getting into that usage where his ADP, like that aligns with what his ADP was for fantasy owners. I kind of expect that to kind of become more of a mainstay as the season goes on. But I do think just because they'll likely be playing from behind this week, it'll be a pass heavy script. There'll probably be a big splash play for one of these Darnell Mooneys or McLeod type characters. So who knows? If you're really struggling there, take a shot. If you want to take like an anytime touchdown shot or like an over long yards prop, pick them on PredictionStrike for like a Mooney or something. I think that's fair game.
Agreed. The Ravens, things are pretty gross over in Baltimore. It seems like Lamar is attempting to play, but I would be under the assumption that he will not. Cooper Rush in the past has shown an ability to sustain an offense in Dallas. He was able to do a good enough job that like guys like CD didn't completely fall off a cliff. But there's no like alpha 1A receiver here in Baltimore that you can rely on to continuously get open and hog all the targets from a quarterback that's just looking for the first guy he finds. And that's probably Zay in this offense, but I don't feel great if I'm a Zay owner. He's going to be better than he was last week. Last week, the offense just couldn't even stay on the field. Only ran 40 plays versus the league average of like 60 odd. So I think they should be able to sustain drives a tad more. It'd be hard to do that less. Mark Andrews, if he's your tight end that you drafted, he's probably going into your lineup. Zay Flowers, I think you could throw in at a flex. He's like a good to shaky flex somewhere in there. He's not, you don't feel amazing about it, but good enough that he'll probably have to go into your lineup.
Yeah, I might. I don't know if this is much of a disagreement at all, but I kind of don't mind Zay Flowers this week relative to the outlook. Like it seemed last week like he was still getting it done relatively well with Cooper Rush, and obviously because he knows the offense less, Zay is so fast, he's probably just going to look at him as the first read more often than not. Also, like the Rams secondary kind of burnable, especially if like they're just getting opportunities in garbage time, maybe playing from behind even against the Rams. Don't mind the Zay start is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I agree. I think you could do a lot worse for sure.
Yeah. All right, let's move it. Carolina Panthers.
Tet, obviously a guy you're throwing in your lineups.
Yeah.
No other pass catchers for me. That's all I want. But I think he's proven himself enough to be a pretty reliable receiver in the NFL already. Hasn't scored a touchdown yet. I think that will be his first big week when he has his typical like 6 for 70-ish and then finally gets in the end zone. People will start to take note on Tet, but I feel good about that. Rest of them.
Yeah. Yeah, he's going up against a pretty terrible pass defense at home this week. I think this week is just as likely as any to be that week that you kind of mentioned where he gets his normal target share but finds his way into the end zone.
Yeah, it should be a high-scoring game, too. The Cowboys' offense has been great, so if you can get pieces in this game of any kind, I like it. Maybe even Bryce Young, I'd feel decent throwing him into your lineup. I think he should throw for a ton of yards.
Question, would you start Bryce Young over Trevor Lawrence this week?
I think I would. The Seahawks defense has been good for the most part. Guys in the secondary should be coming back this week too for the Seahawks. I would feel better about Bryce probably.
Word.
Moving on to the Buffalo Bills playing the Falcons on Monday night. Like we touched on, Kincaid is kind of proving to be a guy that's pretty reliable that you want in your lineup more often than not. If he was your tight end, you're definitely throwing him into your lineup. As for the other guys, Keon caught a touchdown last week. Shakir kind of had his normal Shakir role. Decent
Kind of
target
steadily
share,
increasing.
a lot of routes over the middle. Yeah, and that target share is increasing week over week, which is good to see if you're a Shakir owner. Still probably in the flex category. I think in deeper leagues and stuff, you're feeling solid about throwing him into your lineup. Keon is always going to be boom or bust. He's not going to have that constant production, but a good red zone threat. And if he finds his way into the end zone, like you're going to feel good about the start. So if you're in a pinch or something and he's on your team, I'd be fine chucking him in there. But like Shakir, Kincaid's going in your lineup.
Agree.
Sweet. The Bears, who were on bye last week, they take on the Commanders now, whose secondary has kind of been up and down this year. They've given up a ton of yards in some games, and then last week against the Chargers, the defense played really well. Chargers O-line is obviously banged up, but still a good performance from them. My biggest takeaway here, Rome obviously going into your lineup every week now. I think I would bench DJ Moore this week unless you really need it. I think this offense is going to start continuously going away from DJ Moore every week. He just doesn't seem to be part of Ben Johnson's plans and isn't really like a guy that they're really trusting on those first reads, as you can see by this chart. And with Luther Burden kind of waiting in the wings, a guy that this new regime in Chicago used a second-round pick on, I think he will start to see more and more reps in the slot where you'd normally see DJ Moore. And I think DJ could get moved this season or in the offseason, but I expect him to kind of get phased out after the bye week and see some of these young players they use picks on get some more schemed looks.
Yeah, I hope he gets traded before the offseason.
I think he will. I think it's kind of all trending that way, and it would help fantasy owners a ton because I don't think this situation is going to work out for him.
No.
Bengals, Flacco time. I mean, you kind of are going to have to sell yourself on Joe Flacco being a good player, or at least an upgrade on Jake Browning if you're going to be super hyped on these guys. But week 5, garbage time, Jamar stat-padded, T found his way into the end zone. So it honestly felt pretty good last week if you were an owner of one of these players, just because of how they were able to find the end zone towards the end of that game, and that made their performances look pretty good. The one pass catcher, you're obviously going to start both those guys this week. Taking on the Packers, but I would like Chase Brown a lot. I think they might get down in this game a lot, and Joe Flacco throws a ton of checkdowns. We saw earlier in the season, Dylan Sampson was getting like 10 targets a game, and I think Chase Brown is basically the only running back that the Bengals ever use, and he's used on those passing downs. So I think he should get a ton of targets. That's a pick-em play that I'm looking at, is his receiving yards or receptions, and then also feel better about throwing him into my lineup.
I like that Chase Brown receptions call out a lot. Probably going to be tailing. Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add for the Bengals.
You want to take over the Browns?
Yeah, I can take over the Browns. Obviously, we're going to be having Dylan Gabriel this week, who has a great connection with his tight ends, David Njoku and Fannin. Both could be reasonably fun options for this week. Joe Flacco might have been the problem in Cleveland. I mean, Njoku finally put up tight end 1 numbers for the first time this season. I think that's probably my biggest takeaway. Like, they're taking on a Steelers defense who have also allowed the 7th most fantasy points to the tight end position, I believe. So both him and Fannin are live. I just think Gabriel should be able to strengthen the rapport there with Njoku more likely than Fannin. He's going to be looking for the big targets inside this game against a somewhat shaky pass defense in intermediary routes.
Agreed. I think Njoku is the main guy to be starting. Fannin kind of fluked his way into the end zone and it worked out, but Isaiah Bond role might continuously creep up. But him and Judy, I don't feel great about this week.
Yeah, agree.
The Commanders taking on the Bears this week on Monday night. That Debo pie segment is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Should see no Terry McLaurin again this week. Just a ridiculous target share that he had last week, over 50%. Ertz was like completely uninvolved in the game. I think he finished with 0 fantasy points. Nobody else that I really feel great about. Ertz, you're probably throwing back into your lineup just because you don't really want to use that 1 week as anything too crazy. But with McLaurin likely out again, Debo is like a high-end wide receiver 2, maybe even low-end wide receiver 1 this week. A guy you feel good about, should get involved early and often.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree. I'd say that's the only option you can really look for in the passing attack from Washington this week.
Agreed. Lions, Amon-Ra, every week starter, obviously. JMO, been super disappointed if you're a JMO owner in fantasy so far this year. A decently fun matchup this week. They take on the Chiefs on Sunday Night Football. Should be a pretty high-scoring game. Maybe JMO breaks behind the defense and makes one of those huge plays that makes him relevant. But for now, I'd probably keep him out of your lineup if you have guys you feel a little bit better about. Laporta obviously going in your lineup, had a huge week 5, and Amon-Ra, that 50% target share is unreal. Not many guys in the NFL you feel better about than Amon-Ra.
Yeah, Laporta definitely going in your lineup. Despite, like, it's funny because he obviously got into the end zone, pretty decent red zone read percentage, I figure, but his first read percentage has just been so low relative to what it's been in the past all season.
Yeah. I mean, they threw the ball a decent amount last week, so he did end up with like 7 catches or so. 5 catches for 92 and touchdown. You feel good about that. But I think JMO's the guy that's really suffered, and so it's hard to see where you go with that one. But Laporta is going to be kind of some weeks great, some weeks not. It's kind of just dependent on their game plan any given week. The Titans, super fun. Everybody loves watching the Titans every week. They play the Raiders this week. Secondary is not great, but the pass rush is really good. Probably going to put some pressure on Cam Ward. I think he might have to get the ball out pretty quickly, but I do think that there's enough big play potential to start Calvin Ridley. He had his best week of the season in week 5, and you're probably going to be throwing him back into your lineup. Everybody else, I'm down to stay off of, though.
Yeah, keep your Alec on your bench this week. I don't have anything to add to that. Let's move.
The Bucks. Emeka Egbuka's obviously been elite. Baker spreads the ball a ton, though. Sterling Shepard found his way into the end zone. Basically, if you had a Buccaneer not named Chris Godwin last week, your guy found the end zone. Godwin, you're probably still going to throw into your flex spot. You waited for him to get back from injury. He's back. Mike Evans probably not playing again. So you're going to be throwing him into your lineup. It's not going to feel great, but hopefully this week he can find some better production, or maybe even just find his way in the end zone against the Niners. But Egbuka is kind of elevated to wide receiver 1 status already by now, and you feel good throwing him into your lineup every week.
Yeah, I would second that. I'm probably, if you have the option, I'm probably still being wary with Chris Godwin this week. But if you don't, who knows? Maybe he'll get in there. Yeah.
Same. Opposite side of that same game, the Niners are playing the Buccaneers this week. Kendrick Bourne, ton of targets last week. Definitely you're feeling pretty good about him. It seems like Ricky Pearsall is definitely going to be out again. George Kittle out as well. Could return next week with the IR, but as of now, still out. Jawan kind of status up in the air, but you're going to be starting Kendrick Bourne even if Jawan plays. I think you start Jawan and Kendrick Bourne this week in what should be a high-scoring game. The Buccaneers are giving up a ton of points, but they've also scored a ton. You want pieces in a potential shootout here, so give me Bourne and Jennings.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely think Tongus could be considered, like we kind of mentioned with a couple other tight ends already, as like a flex or I mean a fringe tight end or tight end premium league tight end. But yeah.
Agreed. Seahawks, JSN, chuck him in. AJ Barner scored 2 touchdowns last week, but I don't know how reliable that's going to be. If you're like desperate for a tight end, you could throw him in there. But yeah, JSN, get him in there. Everyone else can stay out of things for now.
I'd love to see that first read percentage for Cooper Kupp go up a little bit, though.
For sure. He had a solid week.
It looks like what's happening with Torrey Horton. We predicted the downfall of Torrey Horton.
Yeah.
All right. Steelers going up against the Browns this week.
Could be very gross.
Yeah, sadly, Jaylen Warren is not a start this week. Seems like that's more of a committee, but we'll get to running backs. DK, yeah, I do. This is just gross. Like, I don't want to start any of these guys, but obviously you're starting DK after last week. That's about
everyone else, I think you can be fine sitting.
Definitely not looking for any like big splash plays from anybody else there.
No. The Jets taking on the Broncos, good secondary. You're going to start Garrett regardless, but it's not a great matchup for him. I think Surtain should be following him everywhere he goes. Garrett's benefited a ton from like random garbage time spikes. He's just been targeted a ton, and he scored a touchdown in garbage time each of the last 2 weeks, which has boosted his fantasy production. Obviously still going into your lineup. And keep an eye on Mason Taylor. I think a lot of people probably picked him up on waivers this week. I think he's a guy that you can definitely start to feel good about going into your lineup going forward for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
The Saints here had a decent performance last week, their first win, and Spencer Rattler's first ever win, which is cool for him. Shout out Spencer Rattler. Chris Olave, just the target share is hard to deny. You're probably still throwing him in your lineup as a flex just because he's a pretty high floor guy. Patriots defense has been good the last few weeks for sure, so it's not the easiest matchup in the world, but they should be playing from behind, throwing the ball a decent amount. Rashid Shaheed is constantly going to be that guy that is going to score 18 points on your bench, and when you actually start him, he's going to score 3 points. So I would probably recommend you sit Rashid Shaheed just because he's probably due for a bad week. It's not really the most consistent performer, but if you have a bunch of guys on bye for whatever reason, like I'd be fine chucking him in there for a week for sure. Taysom Hill, keep an eye on his role continuing to grow. He had a couple passing plays last week. And as he gets more comfortable coming back from that injury, he should get involved in the run game and everything like that we're used to seeing from him. So keep an eye on that. I think that's probably why Juwan Johnson's snap or first read percentage went down last week, just because Taysom Hill's on the field for some of those plays. So less confident with Juwan than you were first 4 weeks, and keep an eye on Taysom.
Yeah. Olave is a must start. Like, he has the most targets in the league, only behind Puka. So he just gets an insane amount of volume. And even though he kind of got overshadowed a bit by Rashid last week, he still had 7 catches, I think. And that was like a down week for him. So it's like he's getting insane volume, taking on the Patriots, who are pretty middling in terms of their pass defense, but have been giving up a lot of touchdowns between their last 2 games to the pass. So I think it's a good spot here for him to eat. Probably going to sit Juwan just based on how he's being targeted recently.
Agreed. Vikings are on bye this week. Don't really need to touch on them. We can talk about them next week. Dolphins, go ahead and talk about your boys.
Yeah, so the Finns, we are obviously without Tyreek Hill. Darren Waller continues to see a ton of usage. Like, the matchup this week against the Chargers doesn't seem to be the best matchup. Doesn't feel great, but like, I think the usage for Waller still seems to be there enough for you to start him this week. I think he is questionable, trending towards playing, if I remember correctly. But yeah, Jalen Waddle. I think you're throwing him into your starting lineup this week. The usage has increased pretty much instantly since the absence of Tyreek Hill. Malik Washington saw a little bit of work last week too. That's probably going to become more of a thing. Still not startable or anything, but I would keep your eye on him. Chargers are definitely not the best matchup in the world secondary wise, but I mean the Dolphins should be playing from behind, making things happen.
Agreed. Waddles must start for me.
Yeah.
The Raiders.
Miami and then Raiders.
Yeah, funny how that worked out. They're taking on the Titans. I mean, you're probably going to be starting Brock if he plays, obviously, and Jacoby Myers after a couple pretty mid weeks is still going to be going into your lineup just because of the high floor he presents, and the Titans defense is nothing to be scared of. So he's probably going to your lineup, and Brock is obviously going into your lineup if he's playing, but that's about it. Trey Tucker is going to be the Rashid Shaheed of the West Coast and kind of play some boomer bust ball, but for now, I'm keeping him on the bench.
Mm-hmm.
The Chargers, potential bounce back game spot taking on the Dolphins. We'll talk about the running backs. That's probably my main lean in this one. This core of receivers, the three-headed monsters, just tough to really predict. They all could play well in any given week. You're probably throwing them all in to your flex if you have them on your roster and you don't have any crazy better options. Ladd's target share going down every week is pretty disappointing. Hopefully that can tick up this week against the Dolphins. Secondary is also not great. The defense isn't great in general for the Dolphins. So yeah, I think you're feeling decent starting these guys, but no one has really taken the leap away from the pack in terms of these three guys.
Yeah, I totally agree.
The Pats, Diggs, get them in your lineup. Everyone else I can do without. Saints defense isn't great. So, I mean, if you want to throw Hunter Henry in there for some red zone shots, if he's the tight end you have, you should do so. But Diggs, get him in there. Nothing really to add on the rest of the boys.
Yeah, got to get Diggs in your lineup. 200-yard games in a row. He's back.
Big time. The Cowboys, they're taking on the Panthers. Should be a high-scoring game, but I will say that J.C. Horn has had a really good season at corner. He's had a really good few seasons at corner. This year, though, has been staying mainly to one side, hasn't been like shadowing a team's best receiver. So that should be good for George Pickens and I guess Ryan Flournoy in this one. But I would probably be fine starting Pickens, considering that's not shadowed coverage. I think all these guys could eat, though. I think Flournoy is a guy who had a really good week last week. That target share was pretty crazy. He's not going to be reliable week in, week out, obviously. But if Turpin's still out and some of these guys, they seem to have enough trust in him that you kind of just want pieces of this offense because they're all going to be guys that put up points week in, week out, just kind of the nature of this offense right now. Jake Ferguson, tight end 1, get him in your lineup. Pickens, get him in your lineup. That's about it.
Yeah, I agree. They're taking on a super mid secondary, should be very high scoring. I would also say get Dak in your lineups this week.
100%. 100%. The Packers had a bye last week. They get to play the Bengals this week, which is a fun matchup for anyone. Get Matthew Golden in your lineup. Get Romeo Doubs in your lineup. Probably both flex plays, but I feel decent about both of them. Tucker Kraft is
for sure
probably a top 10 tight end in the NFL at this point, fantasy-wise. So you're throwing him into your lineup as well, and I think that's about it.
Yeah, you're starting your Green Bay pieces pretty much this week. Cincinnati literally can't stop anybody or anything. So,
yeah, agreed. Texans are on bye this week, so no need to touch on them. But good performance last week. CJ Stroud figured it out a tad. Hopefully they build on that out of the bye. The Colts, they are taking on someone not great. Who was it?
The Colts are taking on the Cardinals.
Cardinals, yeah. Cardinals secondary got torched by Calvin Ridley last week on some of those deep balls. So, I mean, maybe you take a shot on an Alec Pierce longest reception line or something like that. But Pittman's going into your lineup. Floor's high enough. And then Warren's obviously going into your lineup. Josh Downs is going to be pretty boomer bust. We've seen that target share pretty much fluctuate throughout the year. It's hard to really get a read on it. So for now, just those two guys, but you feel good if you have those two guys.
Yeah, I would just second that. Tyler Warren played this week. He has the second highest projected plus minus of any tight ends this week, outside of Trey McBride, who he's playing. And the Cardinals just allow a ton of catches to tight ends. They allow almost 7 catches a week to opposing tight ends for 68 yards a contest. So super strong matchup for Warren. I would start him. I kind of see him getting into the end zone this week, honestly, too.
Like it. Jags. Brian Thomas had his best game of the year so far last week. Target share wasn't even great, but I think he just did a good job of finding his way open, looked a little bit more confident, had 80 yards, didn't find his way in the end zone, but it seems like things are trending in the right direction, possibly. Brendan Strain just went on IR, so you're not going to be super stoked about that. They do have a couple tight ends, Hunter Long and Johnny Munt. No idea really who's going to get the biggest target share. I think they both caught one pass once Brendan Strange went out last week. So probably just keep an eye on both those guys. If one of them takes a huge jump, then I think you probably target them on waivers. But BTJ, depending on the Seahawks injuries in the secondary, you're going to start him regardless, I think. But if the Seahawks guys come back, if Devon Witherspoon is back, if Tariq Woolen's back, you feel less good because that's an elite secondary. So not a great matchup, but he's still going in.
Yeah, I think it's really dependent on these Seahawks injuries this week. I think depending if we still see some guys out, like Trevor Lawrence could be a great start. Because, I mean, we just saw Baker Mayfield shred this defense, and Lawrence has the rushing upside as well. Could be a decent week for him again, coming off that monster MNF game against the Chiefs. So
agreed. Monitor the injuries for the Seahawks secondary. If those guys are out, then I think you can play more pieces than just those. But
yeah,
Chiefs taking on the Lions. Lions have a really good run D, so you're fading all those scrubs anyway. I think you're starting. I think this is all flipped up. I don't even know how to look at this. But we'll just go off of brain power here.
I think, week one is Xavier Worthy.
Was somewhat involved. I assume he's the red guy. Tyquan Thornton found his way open deep a ton. I mean, he's still just going to be boomer bust like the week before had one catch. So not like a must-start guy by any stretch of the imagination. But if you can find a longest reception play or something like that you want to root for, do it. Xavier Worthy, more involved in the offense than I thought he would be. Still kind of working his way back from that injury. But I think he is a guy you're starting this week in what could easily be a high-scoring game. Same with Travis Kelce. That's about it. Just get those two guys in. And last week with no Rashee Rice. So get whatever you can out of Xavier Worthy before his stock is in the mud.
Yeah, maybe get your only Hollywood Brown start of the season out before Rashee comes
Give him one
back.
last rep.
Yeah, exactly.
The Rams get Puka and Devontae in there. As you can see from the chart, everyone else, who cares? This chart is always a fun one to look at. It's basically just those two guys. Everyone else doesn't even matter to break it down. They're just not a big part of the offense. They're going to get some random catches and stuff. We saw Jordan Whittington get a couple, and Tutu Atwell's kind of been a big play threat for them. But Puka, you have as much confidence as anyone in the NFL. Devontae, you feel good with the high concentration of red zone looks he gets.
And the banged up Baltimore secondary should only benefit them.
For sure. We already did the Chiefs. We already did the Rams. All right. Well, that will do it for the receiver portion. We'll get into some running backs right now. Yeah, definitely some fun matchups you could potentially exploit this week, though. And we'll hop into this running back ranking list right here. Hasn't accounted for a ton of injuries, so we will be using some placeholder guys for sure. I don't see Jordan Mason on. Well, they're on bye anyway, so that's good.
Yeah.
Achan, how do you feel about Achan? I think he's a guy you're starting every week, regardless. I think he's in this must-start category. We don't need to order particular guys, but he's going to go in there, basically acting as a wide receiver these days, and the target share is crazy. Gets a lot of work on the ground as well, so he's up there.
Yeah, totally.
Algier, see ya, buddy.
Yeah, Trey Benson.
I mean, in some matchups where they're like very ground dominant, like he could have a role as like a bench player or something, but in a game that should be super high scoring, he's not really a pass catching back. He'll be there. Do we want to use Trey Benson as Michael Carter?
Yeah,
what we will do.
And I think flex is reasonable.
Yeah, I think he's a solid flex guy. Room is kind of cleared out for him after Amari DiMercado's performance. I think after the coach like got fined for hitting Amari DiMercado, though, they'll probably give him another chance just because he like feels bad and doesn't want like the team to hate him and be like, I don't know. I think that's like a very complicated situation to handle, but you're throwing him in at flex for sure. Bijan, get him in there. High scoring game, should get a ton of looks in the passing game and dominate the ground game as well. The Bills like run defense isn't anything spectacular, so he's obviously as must start as it gets. Braylon Allen's dead. Brees Hall, I think probably in the good vibes category, maybe.
Just with volume, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the Broncos defense is good. It's a weird London game, but I think sometimes those games are sloppy and they're low scoring, so you could get Brees the ball a ton. Also, even if they get blown out, he gets like every target in the receiving game as well. So you're feeling good if you have Brees. I don't care about Tank Bigsby or B-Rob.
Well, could B-Rob be JCM if we don't have him, or do we have him?
If we have Eckler, that could be.
There's Eckler somewhere, I think.
Yeah, he's right here. Well, that'll be JCM.
Okay.
B-Rob, don't care. Bucky. Do we have Rashad White on here?
No, yeah, we do at the very bottom.
Very bottom.
I think it's a fun play, low key this week.
Rashad.
Yeah,
I think he's must start, to be honest. Just the amount of targets and things he got. I mean, last week he was over 20 fantasy points. This week on Sleeper, he's projected like 17 fantasy points. So he's going into your lineup regardless. These are these exact situations where you carry a guy like Rashad White in your roster. You're not going to not start him.
Yeah, this dude has 4 catches 2 weeks in a row, and Kyren Williams got 2 receiving touchdowns against the 49ers last week. So I think this is just such a Rashad White week.
Agreed. Charbonnet, I mean, like he's teetering in between these. He always tends to find his way in the end zone, so maybe we'll give him the benefit of the doubt, but he just looks gross out there. Like I feel bad for K9 owners who K9 tends to do the most with his carries, and then you chuck Charbonnet in there, and it is what it is. Yeah. Chase Brown, I think he's probably in this tier.
Good vibes.
It's been bad vibes all year, but I think with how much Joe Flacco targets his running backs, you got to feel somewhat okay about chucking him in here this week. Should get a ton of PPR fantasy points and kind of stat pad his way up there, so he's there for now. The Chuba Rico Dowdle situation is a weird one. I'm tempted to just leave them off the board. I think if Chuba plays, he's probably like a bad flex option, a shaky flex option. And I would put Rico towards the top of this tier. But I think if Chuba doesn't play, Rico immediately goes in this must-start category. So it's tough to fully navigate. I think we'll just leave them here because it's trending towards Chuba playing as of right now. But we will that's kind of going to be up in the air. If he doesn't play, Rico needs to be in your lineup.
I agree. CMC must
get him up there.
Yeah.
Should be high scoring. Buccaneers offense has been fun playing in shootouts. C-Mac is a guy you want in there, and he's a guy you just want all the time. What do you think about Derrick Henry these days?
I think it's going to be a little bit harder for him to operate without defenses constantly having to worry about Lamar. Like, he only got 8 carries in the first game without Lamar. I mean, he's obviously it's possible. I think Cooper Rush can still run an offense, so I think it's more than possible Derrick Henry still has like a reasonably good game, maybe gets in the end zone, but certainly less reliable now that Lamar's gone and there's less threats to worry about on the field.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, he's a flex. I think the game script doesn't really help him out a lot. And Justice Hill was involved in the passing game when this game kind of got out of hand. So I think like you're still probably throwing him in your lineup, but if you're one of those guys that has like Brees and Achane, and then you got lucky on the waivers and you picked up Rashad White, like I see a world where you can be fine benching Derrick Henry in that situation.
Yeah, totally.
Demont, solid flex guy, high floor, going to get some carries. Will probably find his way into the end zone. Just tends to do that always, but he'll be there in that flex category for sure. JCM, I think you got to put him in good vibes.
Yeah.
The Bears defense just gave up like 160 yards, all-purpose yards to Ashton Genty, and JCM had his big breakout. I expect his amount of carries to only go up or probably stay the same. We got a ton of work last week, but yeah. I expect him to start to be more of a clear lead back. So he's going to go into that category for sure.
Yep. Second that. Great matchup. I would almost like put him into the must start, but
yeah. ETN probably going in here, maybe the top of flex. Seahawks defense is pretty good, but he's dominated their carry load so far this year, and I don't see that changing in this one. Jameer, get him up there.
Yeah.
Just not much else needs to be said. Chiefs should be a high-scoring game. I don't see a situation where Jameer ever doesn't find his way in the end zone too, so about as high floor as you can get. Amarian Hampton, this is going to be Hassan Haskins for the week. I mean, if you picked up Hassan Haskins, you're probably putting him in this tier just because the Dolphins' run D has been so bad. It's as good of a matchup as you can find, and he should receive the majority of the carries. The only reason why he wouldn't be up here with like a Rashad White or something is just because we don't really know what the split between Kamani Vidal and him is going to be. So for now, we'll leave him in there. But if you get any extra intel, he could obviously go into this must-start category. Yeah. We'll put RJ Harvey on the bench tier for now. Just not reliable enough.
Decent matchup, but
yeah, it's hard to see with the Dobbins and RJ Harvey situation. Dobbins is still the clear lead guy, so you're not feeling great yet.
Josh Jacobs smashed to the moon.
Yeah, get him in there. Why do you like him so much this week?
Taking on the Bengals, who are just absolutely abysmal against the run, which is like the main thing. But their offensive line is just fucking. I mean, their defensive line is just terrible. So it's like I think Josh Jacobs is going to smash. I think Green Bay is going to be playing from ahead, which is a lot more run-oriented script. Probably just melting the clock with the run game. Should be a classic Josh Jacobs game.
Yeah, it's like a giant matchup for him. Yeah. James Cook, you're feeling good about every week. Had a down week last week, but that seems to be his floor, like his absolute floor. Can only build on that against the Falcons. Should be a fun game. Hopefully finds way in the end zone. Javonte Williams has slowly found his way into this category for me. At some point when you've done it over and over again, like you kind of just deserve to be up in this tier. Never would I have thought I was going to see Javonte next to Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan, but he's deserved it. He's the running back 3 in fantasy this year, and a pretty favorable matchup against the Panthers. Again, he should find his way in the end zone. This offense just keeps finding ways to score. So until further notice, he'll be up here. Jaylen Warren, we touched on this a little bit. Seems like a bit of a split backfield. Are you benching him? Is he a shaky or flex?
Yeah, I think I'm benching Jaylen Warren just with this week with that backfield situation, especially against the Browns.
Agreed. Ashton, I think you got to put him in good vibes. The carries have continually gone up. Had a huge game a couple of weeks ago against the Bears, and the Titans are a pretty favorable matchup for him. I think in some worlds you could have him up here, but I just don't think he's done it week in, week out enough to be up there. But he'll be towards the earlier half of this category for me. Jordan Mason on bye. Jonathan Taylor obviously going up here. Been the best player in fantasy this year. Another like 30-point game last week, 3 touchdowns. You're not going to deny Jonathan Taylor. Quinshon Judkins, he's going to be probably here somewhere. The carry load is insane. Steelers run D is not anything spectacular. And he's been able to carve up better run Ds. Even gets involved in the passing game, could catch like 4 passes. If he finds his way in the end zone, he'll easily be in that 17 to 20 point tier this week. Been a great player all year. I've been excited to watch Quinshon Judkins. What do you think about Alvin Kamara?
They take on the Patriots. Patriots run D is pretty decent. I don't know. I'd say flex maybe for Kamara this week.
I think that's fair. I also think Kendre is slowly eating at some of the groundwork. Kamara's still going to catch passes and work on that floor, but he's just not like the huge ceiling guy we've seen for him in the past, just because some of that role has been eaten up and their offense just doesn't score enough points to sustain a huge ceiling. Kenneth, I think, will have probably high up in this tier. I still don't like him as much as any of these guys, probably. I mean, you can maybe put him at the back of this with a Hassan Haskins or something, but yeah, just not a guy that you love because Charbonnet's taken every bit of end zone, red zone work, and even being used in the 2-minute drill on pass catching down. So Kenneth looks great on the field. He's played really well. It just hasn't really worked out well in fantasy. So for now, he's there. Kyron taking on the Ravens. I think he has to be up here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's going to be in this tier for sure. Caught 2 touchdowns last week, did have that costly fumble, but in a game that they should dominate the script of, I think he'll get fed a ton, and the Ravens run D has not been good, so I feel good about Kyron being like a top 5 running back in fantasy this week, maybe top 7. Najee's dead. Pacheco did run kind of angry last week. He brought back some of that classic Pacheco, just like cloud of dust, just really pounding those feet. It looked like Pacheco in the past, but the Lions' run D is really good. I feel worse about him than any of the guys in this tier, so he's going to be on the bench for me this week. Tony P against the Raiders, kind of game script dependent, but I feel like you feel a little bit better about him than you have in the past. Should be able to find his way in the end zone. Last week did end up over like 85 total yards, so step in the right direction. He was part of that comeback. He continues to get like every carry on the ground, so you feel pretty good about Pollard. I would say some of these guys you might start over him, but the vibes are better in the Pollard camp just off of a fun little week. Ray Davis going to be on the bench. Elite handcuff, but never going to be a guy you're starting as long as this man is healthy. Ramondre, I think he's probably the bottom of this flex tier. Fumble issues have been crazy, but they just can't seem to give up on him. Seems to be like the right fit in the offense, the guy that they want out there on important plays, and he scored 2 touchdowns last week. So until they really punish him for the fumble problems, I'm not going to be able to move him lower than this.
Yeah, I would agree.
And then we got Quan, revenge game tonight. Hasn't looked good this season, but I feel like he always finds a way against the Giants. You're not going to keep him out of your lineup. He's must start.
Scadaboo, I think you can start him this week. Tyron Tracy does come back. Like, I'd be flex is probably where I would put him, but
yeah, put him here.
Yeah,
I don't think Tracy's really going to hit the ground running. He's probably a guy you can put in this bench tier. Definitely will eat at some of the pass catching role. I think Tracy should catch some passes for sure, and Scadabo might just be like the ground dog that we've seen him be in the first few weeks. But I feel pretty solid about that.
Yeah, and he's been getting, since the Tracy injury, he's gotten a bunch of red zone reads, so that might become a little bit more the new norm, like check downs to Scadaboo. Also, this Eagles run D has been a lot worse than it was in recent years.
Agreed. Swift, I think you put him top of here, maybe bottom of this tier. I feel like he's pretty similar to Tony Pollard. Maybe we'll give him a rep here. Yeah. Should be a pretty high scoring game. I don't think Swift is like a good running back by any means, but there's just nobody that's going to take these touches away from him. Like Kyle Monunga is just also not a very good running back. There's nobody that's really going to put the pressure on DeAndre Swift. So as long as the volume's there, and in a game that I think could easily be a shootout, the total's 50.5, which is one of the highest of the weekend. He's going to be in here just because I think you want pieces that are playing in this game. And lastly, Travion Henderson. I think you're putting him here still, kind of similar to RJ Harvey. You like the talent, and he's shown some flashes, but like Ramondre still just does dominate the touches for whatever reason. The Antonio Gibson injury is very helpful for Travion in the future. I think that could lead to him potentially getting his chance, having a huge game, and then backfield is his. But for now, he's going to be on the bench there. And that's going to do it for this tier list we have for you. We talked about our pass catchers. We talked about our backfields and some tight end options and things like that. So hopefully you gained some valuable intel and you're ready to attack this week 6 of fantasy football.
Yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure to download the PredictionStrike app and take advantage of all these reads on PredictionStrike. There's Pick'em, there's Sparks, there's just stocks that you can invest in, which is our flagship product, athlete stocks that move based on fantasy scoring, which are all fun to do. So make sure to do that. Follow PredictionStrike on socials. We'll be back next week with another breakdown.
Thanks for watching. Peace.
Peace.